This podcast is brought to you by the Down the Middle Podcast. Hand by Valena.
The Final Frontier Podcast. These are the voyages of Jake Boger and Justin Spur. Our weekly mission, to explore memories of Star Trek's strange new worlds, to recall the search for new life and new civilizations, to boldly go where no one has had the spare time to go before.
Talk about some evil Kirk.
Let's talk about some evil Kirk. Welcome,
I-
everyone. Because I like that. I'm gonna keep that evil Kirk. Welcome, everyone, to this week's episode of The Final Frontier. As always, I'm joined by my co-host, my second. Oh my God, my first officer, Justin.
Heck yeah.
Are you Justin?
I am. I was just in time today. You know what? I'm owning that. I'm owning that.
Spur time.
I heard that my whole childhood. I'm owning it.
So before we get into the episode, I do have a couple of fuck ups that I would like to address for the fans. Now, some of these actually didn't even make it to air, but I'm going to mention them anyway for the benefit of your knowledge. I believe it was in the first episode I had said that the uniforms were made of wool in the original prop uniforms.
Yeah.
I think the sweater ones were, but these here were not.
Yeah.
These were made out of velour fabric.
Oh, really?
However, Kirk's little wraparound green one was made of a wool fabric.
Oh, okay.
And then
Interesting.
in the third season, they were replaced with nylon. And again, this would have been the Sulu Botany episode, Charlie X. You had said something about Yeoman Rand carrying a purse.
Yeah.
And I had no idea what you were talking about. So I went back and watched that part of the episode. It's not a purse she's carrying. It's a tricorder.
It's very purse-like in its appearance.
They are, and they are. That's why I didn't even think twice about it. I didn't even notice it because Yeoman Rand is, as far as usually carrying a tricorder when she's on duty. Maybe it's to access information the
And
captain might
what's a
need.
tricorder?
It's essentially like a science scanning device, which
Like
is
so, like kind of like a tablet or like kind of one of
it's
those
more like
Helios.
more like a. It's actually closer to a Pokedex, but for
Oh, okay.
science.
Okay, that's an easy enough
But it can
reference point.
scan
Okay,
as well. Yeah, so
gotcha.
it's a thing that does science all wrapped
Got
in
it.
one.
A lot of that happening in this episode.
So another thing that I said was I couldn't remember, so I had assumed that I remembered that Dr. McCoy was born in Kentucky. I was close, not really. He is from the South, but Dr. McCoy was actually born in Atlanta, Georgia. And then one other thing, when we were talking about the buffalo during the man trap, and I'd mentioned the American alligator, I was a little off on my timeline. So the American alligator was taken off the endangered species list in 1987. But if you
Really?
recall, you remember me saying that I remember reading about the alligator being on the endangered species list. Well, I looked all that up, and I'm fairly certain the reason I had read that was because just the things I was reading were older than 1987, which
Oh,
would make
that makes
sense.
sense. Yeah, that
And
makes sense.
there might have been some. I mean, I was in elementary school, so it's only a few years removed, like 7 or 8 years removed from them being removed from the endangered species list. So,
Yeah. I
or
mean,
maybe
yeah,
it
there's a
was,
lot of stuff like that
yeah,
where it's just not updated knowledge.
yeah. And for all I can remember, I mean, I was young. Maybe, maybe maybe they had said something in the past tense, but I didn't remember it being in the past tense. So something like
Fair
that.
enough.
But those were and you'll find if you watch any of our other podcasts, I always have segments called "What Did We Fuck Up," and that is the first "What Did We Fuck Up" for the Final Frontier. But
I always correct my mistakes if I can. If I get fact, especially when I get fact checked in comments.
I will verify before I admit being wrong. But if I'm wrong, I will admit to being wrong. And The funny thing is, we're recording this one before we have any comments, so
That is true.
I'm sure we'll be brought to task on a few more things, and we shall address them. But we didn't fuck up near as bad as the Enterprise crew does in this episode.
Okay, first note. Obviously, got to get my note on the Paramount Plus description, which obviously details an evil Kirk. And my first note is just, I'm sorry, evil Kirk. Hell yeah! How evil could evil Kirk possibly be?
Very evil. But
Well, it turns. I don't know. I question exactly how evil,
well,
but
and it's funny you mentioned that because I have a note much later in the episode that I actually don't really agree with calling it good and evil Kirk because there's, believe it or not, for a 1960s show, there's a bit more nuance in that. We are, of course, talking about season 1, episode 6, The Enemy Within. Star date for this episode 1672.1 all the way through to 1673.1, which I would imagine, again, I still don't understand how star dates work, but I'm assuming that's a day.
it seems like at least a day, based upon just the events of. Because I think there's a sleep that happens. They go to bed. I think. Certainly, you see Kirk's room in this episode a bunch.
Yeah, but I think he's just taking a nap. I'm not really sure. But anyhow, what would you call the proper year date in this episode is 2266, and the original air date was October 6th, 1966. This episode was written by Richard Matheson and directed by Leo Penn. And if you think that sounds familiar, you would be correct because Leo Penn is the father of Sean and Chris Penn.
Oh no, no kidding. He did. Wait, he directed. He did a good job directing this. I got some notes about Kirk doubles later on that I was quite impressed by.
You know what's funny is a lot of people make fun of this episode. It's one of my favorite episodes, actually, even since I was young,
I
first
really
watching Star
liked
Trek.
it.
But a lot of people make fun of Bill Shatner in particular, and I'm watching it and I'm like, no, this considering that he's playing two versions of the same person,
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
mean,
it's
but
actually quite good.
I will say it does get silly. But I
It
mean, at this
does.
point, I think I've established I love me some silly, so I was
Well,
all
and
for it.
and again, it's like this wouldn't fly today, but that's because
No.
today we've gone through the emo phase where everybody's like, if they're evil, they're just like, I'm very introspective.
Yeah, well,
I'm
I mean
depressed.
that's my overall thing with this episode was I wanted more from Evil Kirk than I got, but we'll get to that later.
There was eyeliner.
There was some eyeliner.
There was
Um,
more than some eyeliner.
so there's some shots of the Enterprise from the outside that don't look CGI replaced in this episode. They look like actual models.
I have a note on that. It's very funny. It's funny how the more we do this, the more we pick up on the same things.
I
Which
mean, I
I
also have a weird eye for it. Jordan says I have a weird eye for that kind of stuff.
well, and I actually I'm gonna give you major kudos because I love the fact that you keep bringing, and I keep forgetting to do it, but you keep bringing back the Paramount Plus synopsis for each episode.
Of course, it's gonna be. I love me a running gag.
I
So,
love it. I love it. Before we actually get into the story of the episode, Richard Matheson, also wrote Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which we've talked about before. It's the famous Twilight Zone sketch segment, whatever you may call it, with William
there's something on the
Shatner.
plane.
There's something on the wing.
On the plane. There's something
Yeah.
on the wing. Oh,
But
interesting.
yes, he wrote this
Wasn't
one.
that for the
So
movie though, or did they do?
I
Is
thought
there
it
two
was
different
in
versions of it?
there might be two. I always thought that the Will Shatner one was in the series. That's what I'd always been
Oh, I
told.
thought he was in the movie, but I could
I
be. Maybe he does both.
And also, I would like to apologize to our viewers. There were a couple of previous episodes, I think two of them, where for whatever reason my mic settings were all amuck. I tried to clean it up as best I could, but it still sounds kind of
Kind
crummy.
of garbly. Oh,
Like you can understand what I'm saying. It just sounds really, really bad. So I apologize. But as far as I'm aware, the issue has been fixed, so this should be nice and clean. And Justin always sounds fine. So
okay, good, because I'm super paranoid about my audio. It's like the one thing I care about.
thankfully, we've never had to scrap a recording yet. So knock on wood.
Yeah.
We're doing good so far. But anyway, our episode begins with the USS Enterprise on a geological exploration of the planet Alpha 177. Geological technician Fisher falls off a cliffside, suffers an injury, and is covered in a mysterious yellow powder. He's transported back aboard the Enterprise, but Chief Engineer Scott has some trouble with the transporter. The transporter equipment appears to be fine, but he notices the dust covering Fisher's uniform that may have interfered with the transport. it interfered with the transport.
Yeah, well, I'm okay. I just realized as you were describing that they never say what the dust is or how it affected the transporter, do they?
They don't say how, but so okay, couple notes. First of all, if you did you notice the random ass canopy they had down on the planet?
No, I was so distracted by the dog in the little costume
Oh,
that I
the Alpha Spaniel.
is that what that my obviously my note is what sort of creature is that? I thought it was a puppet. I started to type
No,
out the
it's
notes. That's a sweet looking puppet until Kirk tried to pet it and it clearly the dog wasn't trained all that well and it like nipped up at him. That was there was a lot of like this is pre a quick aside. You know the movie that caused like that little message at the end of the movies that say no animals were harmed in the making of this movie. The
yeah,
movie
this is
that's the reason
before
for
that.
that. Yeah, this is before that. Um,
Oh, I feel like I know this, but I'm blanking. What was the movie?
Milo and Otis.
No, that wasn't the American.
Uh,
That
I
was a
think
Japanese movie.
yeah, but I had heard that was the reason that was the or part of the inspiration because of
So
how many animals died during it.
no, so actually, these regulations existed prior to that movie, and
Oh, interesting. I
there
didn't
were
know that.
allegations made. And here's the thing, though, because I know what you're talking about. I'm pretty sure some animals died just because
Oh yeah, for sure.
of
I've
what they
seen
were
I've seen
having to
clips
do.
of that from that movie. Yeah.
However, they did an
Uh,
investigation and they claimed they could find no actual evidence. Well, yeah, because they
huh.
didn't keep a hold of the animals that they
Yeah.
could. Um, but
But
actually,
I
I'm gonna skip ahead because I have a note on that. Where is it?
this gave that this is before that era of I that's the thing about watching old movies. You get that vibe every once in a while. This is before they made that rule vibe. This episode gave me that vibe.
Oh no, so the dog-like creature that first Sulu and later Kirk hold was given a sedative about an hour before those scenes were filmed. The aggressive version
Uh,
was obtained by starving it for 24 hours, then prodding it with a
yeah.
stick to get the
Yeah.
reaction. Now, it does say such treatment of animals in Hollywood would be banned several years later after concerns from cast and crew within the industry led to pressure on the studios, which eventually agreed to involve the American Humane Association in productions where real animals were involved.
Yeah, that this episode gave me, especially when with the, I mean, you have to jump ahead. The episodes where it's mad, it gave me that like they're poking this dog with a stick kind of vibe. So that doesn't surprise me to hear that.
I really have zero tolerance for animal cruelty, but I will say animals were treated like shit in many productions in Hollywood prior to those
Oh
regulations
yeah,
being. So this is fairly light, but I mean they did drug a dog and poke it with a stick after starving it. So um
yeah. Any amount of mistreating an animal makes me unhappy. But
yeah,
like you're
I'm not
right
a
on the let me still dance with that line to this day. In my opinion, so like this is on the like there's a
it's
worse
on
incident on like that movie A Dog's Purpose that was way worse than maybe giving it some sedatives.
yeah, so but I guess as far as animal cruelty goes, this gets a finger wag from me.
Yeah, it gets a no, don't do that again, please.
Not so much of "fuck you, I hope you all die" sort of vibe,
Yeah. But I
but
just
there's
it
definitely
really did look dopey though. Like I thought I legit I thought it was like it was a hand puppet that Sulu was carrying for most of that for opening scene. I have a couple notes about the transporter effect. That looks good for 1960 if that is indeed the original effect. I was pretty impressed with it.
it appears to be because it didn't seem glaringly different to me.
No, just a question about 1960s slang. What is he acted like a burnout mean?
A burnout would be somebody who like smokes weed, basically.
And that's like a it just seems like an odd slang for like Star Trek. I don't know why. It just stuck out to me.
Wait, did somebody in the script use burnout?
Yeah, yeah. When Spock is examining the guy who has the I'm forgetting the name, spacing on the name, the guy who gets the yellow
Fisher.
powder when he first Fisher when he's scanning him, he pats him on the shoulder and he says, "Go get out of that. Don't go decontaminate that uniform." And then he makes a comment to himself and he says, "Oh, he acted like a burnout."
I don't think I heard that.
And I was like, does that mean that is that like the burnout, like hippie burnout? And I'm like, that feels decidedly not very Star Trek to me,
Oh,
even up until this point.
no. Okay, so he's not referring to Fisher. He's referring to Scotty is talking about the transporter.
Oh, okay, okay.
They said
So that's why I made this note.
it could have been a burnout.
It acted like a burnout.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay,
That
so
makes
I was
sense.
gonna say I don't know that burnout existed yet as a
I was gonna
slang term.
say Because I'm like, in the 60s, is this a common slang? But he's talking about a burnout in the transporter.
It's
That
talking
makes
about a
sense.
burnout in the circus, a circuit,
That makes
not
sense.
circus. True to many Star Trek landing parties, there's just random shit that makes no sense. Like on their geological expedition of a planet, they've got this tiny canopy set up that is accomplishing nothing because it's blowing in the wind. It's about to fall over. It's not covering anyone like
I,
at all. I
I mean,
don't know why this is here
they seem suitably ill prepared to go to a planet that apparently gets as cold as it does.
At night. Yeah, you would
Yeah.
think. And then did we not learn our lesson about alien substances from the previous episode?
I mean, there's a lot of not learning lessons in this episode, I find.
Now, somebody in the comments is going to point out that chronologically this episode takes place first, and you would be correct. It does. But then I would say for the Naked Time episode, did we not learn our lesson about alien substances from this episode, which
From this
happened prior?
experience,
It's
what's
still
lessons worse?
it's still inexcusable. Decontamination on the original Enterprise is subpar. Ocean needs to be called in. This is
I
two
mean,
episodes in a row. Two
it's
episodes in a row.
you're not wrong.
Why would you?
You're not wrong.
Decontamination protocol is after they transport back onto the ship.
Yeah, then
This
check them
makes
out.
this makes no sense whatsoever.
I
At least in Star Trek Enterprise, they decontaminate before they get off the shuttle into the shuttle bay, and there's a decontamination room right there,
see, that
and
makes more
then they go
sense.
back on the ship.
That makes far more sense.
Yeah, which honestly, the decontamination room in Star Trek Enterprise was just used to add some sex.
Of course, naturally.
Not actual sex, but see, they have to like get down to their skivvies and rub this gel on themselves to
Right.
decontaminate. So, of course, the first chance they get to Paul half naked, and they're like,
Of course.
rub gel on her back.
I mean, and to be fair, I know when that show came out, so it's very much of that era.
It is. Yeah, it's like now when I think about it, I'm always going to imagine Deadpool being like, "Get out your special sock, nerds."
It's gonna get good.
But yeah, so clearly the Enterprise suffers from short-term memory loss, all of them. And keep in mind, as we continue the story, keep in mind that Scotty has just acknowledged that there's probably something wrong with the transporter. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's just a lot of like they figure out the problem and then forget the problem like a lot, or realize the problem and then forget the solution. Just like a ton. I have a lot of notes about it. We're gonna get into it.
Yeah. But Scott, at this point in the story, Scotty has literally said,
That acted like a burnout.
something
Right?
must be wrong with the transporter. And then Captain Kirk transports back to the ship. The transporter appears to work correctly, but Kirk experiences some disorientation, and Scotty escorts Kirk out of the transporter room. While unsupervised, the transporter activates a second time, materializing a second version of Kirk, which behaves more maliciously than his counterpart. This evil Kirk begins to wander the ship, and those he encounters are confused by his behavior.
My first note is, in case you had any doubt about which one was the evil one, I just need the immediate that close up on his face. Oh my god, I love close ups in this show. They're all amazing. And then I thought it.
The
Yeah, yeah.
uplighting, the eyeliner, the Vaseline, because yes, they rubbed petroleum jelly on his face to get.
He was Evil Kirk was very. I'm just gonna skip ahead. Evil Kirk was very sweaty. Just to contrast that he was evil, he was so sweaty this
I
episode.
have a note that says more sweaty Kirk.
More sweaty Kirk. He was so sweaty. So I initially thought that they were gonna do something to do with like this episode was gonna kind of be about the idea of when you teleport, what gets left behind. Like, are you a clone? Are you a copy? Is it about like breaking you down? I thought it was maybe gonna explore that idea. Turns out I was very wrong. It was more about the idea of morality. But
It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
and then my next note is evil Kirk needs a little drinky.
He does. He's thirsty. Again, Scotty, would you not double check the transporter if you think there might even possibly remotely be an issue with the transporter? Would you not check that out before beaming up the captain? I mean, at the very least, test it on a red shirt.
I mean, okay, to be fair to okay, I don't want to, once they figure out what the problem is, there's a lot of like really dumb moves that are happening in this episode. Like and you're right. It's like something's up with this. Like there's something hinky, something's not right. Like red flags. There's not enough red flags. They don't recognize red flags fast enough, I think.
Yeah. Well, once again, Dr. McCoy is proven right because McCoy throughout this series and throughout the movies is always wary of the transporter. He prefers not to use it if it can be avoided. Obviously, he does because
Yeah.
he has to. Um,
Expediency.
I get it. I get it. I also laughed at the fact that Scotty disobeys a direct order for plot convenience because he has to not be in the transporter room, which Kirk looks him in the face and orders him to not leave the transporter room unattended. And he's like, I'll only be gone for a moment, Captain. And then in that moment, evil Kirk, which again, if Scotty had followed orders, he would have seen evil Kirk materialize and been like, holy shit, there's another captain, like
I have so many notes about Evil Kirk. I mean, the number one is I have no idea what Shatner was going for with Evil Kirk. Just generally, I don't know what the vibe was supposed to be. He does some concerning stuff as Evil Kirk. Like, really, that's your id, man. Really,
I mean,
you
yeah,
should
that's
self-evaluate.
well, no. See, okay, so here's the thing. Like that's the pure id unchecked by the
Yeah,
ego or the super ego. So
yeah.
I get it because that's animal impulses at its very core. A modicum of intelligence because he can still speak and he can still think, but he's basically operating off of drives, as we see.
The,
He goes for liquor. He tries to, you
you
know,
know,
you know,
yeah. I was
yeah.
like, man, this is dark for the 1960s. That scene in
Oh,
particular, I was like,
it
I
gets
was impressed in the sense that I'm surprised they got away with this.
It gets worse. But before we get to that, fun fact about Kirk's alternative green uniform, while chronologically, this is not the first time we see it, this was the first episode that they shot with it, and the only reason that green uniform exists is so the audience could tell the difference between good Kirk and evil Kirk.
I was literally gonna, I literally have a note about that later, and I said there's a lot of like he's wearing a different shirt. He should just point out the fact that he's wearing a different shirt, and
I
it's very definitely to help William Shatner keep track of his own continuity. I guarantee you.
Which they failed to do in Charlie X because he changes clothes spontaneously between these
Oh,
same two outfits.
I was gonna say more just so he would remember which version of the character he was, because
Yeah.
I get that feeling. Shit, am I the evil version or the good version in this scene? And it's funny because not to jump ahead, but they don't really they do clearly realize that in the at the end of the episode, because there's a moment where they're wearing the same clothes. Like, clearly someone at the end of the production week was like, oh no, they're wearing different clothes. Feels like they figured this out much earlier, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and then the other note I have is Brandy and sick bay. This really is the 1960s.
Right?
He's just got a bottle of Sorium brandy just right there with the medication. Like there's a
Hey,
liquor cabinet in the fucking sick
it'll
bay.
cure what ails you. It will cure what ails you.
I mean, to be fair, alcohol is for some things. I've actually heard that I don't know this from experience, but I know someone told me this. Apparently, one of the best things you can do if you have like a urinary tract infection is drink a beer. Apparently,
Really?
I don't know if that's true.
Interesting.
The person who told me this was not a doctor, but I'll be honest, I believe her.
I mean, dark joke. Was the person who said this an alcoholic? Because then I would maybe,
No.
No, oh, okay, fair enough. To be fair
Oh,
though,
I remember now because this was many years ago. But apparently, she got one. Her aunt was a nurse and told her that.
I mean, to be fair, beer I could believe, because beer is just like bread water at its
Yeah,
core.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, like she said that, and I'm like,
If you were
I
like
could
a fifth
I
of
could see
vodka
that.
every day, I'd be like, well, okay,
Oh, and she didn't even drink, so that was like a she was
yeah,
like, yeah, I prescribe you one beer.
yeah. I
Um,
could do that. Yeah, see, that's another. Wasn't expecting to see a full bore sexual assault on Star Trek. It is kind of a tense scene.
Scotty assists in beaming a dog-like animal, the alpha spaniel, from the planet, but two identical creatures materialize, a good and an evil one, just like Kirk. One
Yeah, I was
completely
surprised how quickly they figured it out. Like, wow, 10 minutes in and they already know about the evil good thing. Interesting.
just not with Kirk. Scotty reports this to Mr. Spock and then orders the transporter taken out of service to investigate, stranding the landing party on the planet as the bitterly cold night sets in. The subplot of the stranded crew members on down on the planet wasn't in the original script. It was added by the
Interesting.
staff writers. But here's the thing, Richard Matheson hated this part. I actually really liked it because it adds stakes and it adds tension.
That's so funny. I agree with Richard Matheson. I felt that it kind of it didn't need it. The tension between the evil and good Kirk is enough. It just was an extra layer of I like it because obviously we've established I love me some Sulu, and he does some great one liners. So I wouldn't cut it for that reason alone. But like in terms of its what it adds to the story, I do agree. It didn't need it.
See, I disagree because it adds a ticking clock.
I don't think this episode
Well,
necessarily
so
needed a
okay,
ticking clock. That's where I disagree.
it does, and I'll explain why. Because if there wasn't a ticking clock, the solution is simple. You capture evil Kirk, keep him sedated until you figure out what's going on. There's no tension, there's no not like there's tension as long as you're still hunting for evil Kirk. But
Sure, but also Evil Kirk, he gets strapped to the bed and just disappears for a solid chunk of this episode, and then just becomes about good Kirk being indecisive. So
right, but he's
I
indecisive because there's a ticking clock.
but that's where my overall issue with this episode generally is I wish it was more of a mystery, or they spent more time having evil Kirk go evil,
Sure,
have him
sure.
be way more good up, like don't immediately be like waha mustache twirly out the do the really funny close up. That's funny, but I think as a character, evil Kirk didn't get enough for me. Like I if enough for me to for him to do his really like big monologue at the end of the episode where it's like, I don't want to go back. Well, it's like, yeah, but you've been strapped to a bed for most of the episode, so I just don't really get why.
Yeah, so if they went that direction, I would agree with you that you didn't need the landing party. But to me, that's what the ticking clock adds tension.
I don't
Now,
disagree with that. I just didn't feel it needed the tension, but
now
I don't disagree.
there is a massive plot hole though, and is the fact that why didn't they just send down a shuttlecraft?
That's fair. Well, I mean, that I guess you're right because that does lead to one of my other notes, which is like, in terms of the evil Kirk disappearing and them not being able to find him. How big is the Enterprise? Like in terms of like the interior of it? Like,
It's
is there
quite
something that
large.
it's quite large? Like that's something that's possible? Like a guy could just
Oh yeah.
disappear in there?
Well,
Okay,
you
okay,
got
fair
to.
enough.
So they established in one of the early episodes there's 240 some odd crew members, and you got to remember there the bridge, which is one of the smallest rooms on the starship. Um, you've got all the areas that people work, and then housing for 200 some odd people. Plus, the bulk of the ship is actually all engineering and bulkheads and ductwork. So
Interesting. Okay.
it's quite large. It's pretty big. So I already said, why didn't they just send a shuttlecraft? Now I know the real answer to this is because the shuttlecraft hadn't been established in Star Trek yet. But just using, as Spock would say, being logical. If you have a ship in space that goes on planetary explorations, even if you have transporter technology may break.
You'd have a backup, a
You would
lifeboat, as it were. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You would need, or at the very least, an escape pod of some kind. But I mean,
Yeah.
and they do establish the Enterprise has a few shuttlecraft in it later in the series. So,
Yeah, you'd have an emergency backup. Certainly, if you're like as not militarized, but like organized, I guess, as this. They haven't established who they, at least as far as I can tell, who we work for quite yet. We just kind of our vague starship. So yeah, presumably they have emergency protocols. You're right.
yeah. So, and then the other
Backup
thing
emergency
too, and
protocols.
what somebody might say is like, oh, well, maybe it's just not equipped with it yet. That seems like really poor planning, especially when you consider the fact that, again, Star Trek Enterprise establishes that shuttlecraft were used prior to the transporter's invention.
Yeah.
So it's a technology that would have been considered old by now, but
Yeah.
you would still have it around, kind of like how I mean, before they had the airplane, they had the automobile, and people still
Yeah.
travel by automobile.
I mean,
And
train. Train was
before
the
the train, you had ships, and before
yeah. Well, the
these
one
modes
thing
of transportation, people still ride horses for fuck's sake.
the one that got me was like, and I even this kind of blew my mind was the Titanic. Like the movie kind of gives the impression that it's a cruise ship, like our understanding of cruise ship, but it's an ocean liner, and which they existed before airplanes. Like
Hmm.
that's how you've got cross continental. You went on these. That's why there was all these poor people on it, was because that's what it was. It was just a cross con. And I had no idea. Like
Yeah,
I
it
did.
was
Oh yeah,
travel.
right. There's a before airplanes. Right. That makes sense. Duh.
Precisely. And now, which again, after the airplane's invented for mass travel, the cruise liner, as we know it today, is invented because people still want to pay for the experience. But if they just need to get somewhere, it's much more cost effective to do by plane
Yeah.
or
I
automobile.
I I looked it up, and they take like cruise liners as like they exist as the Titanic, like still kind of exist, but like the last one was basically it's mostly just a tourist thing. The last one was decommissioned like eons ago.
Elsewhere on the ship, the good Kirk begins to feel uncertain and struggles to make decisions. The evil Kirk, in a drunken state, which boy, he got hammered fast, assaults
Right? I
Yeoman
mean,
Rand.
He's chugging what, brandy from a bottle, straight from
That's
a bottle.
true.
I mean, yeah, that's some
That's
strong. That's
true.
not weak shit.
In his drunken state, he assaults Yeoman Rand in her quarters. During the struggle, she scratches Evil Kirk's face with her fingernails. When Fisher witnesses this and calls security, the Evil Kirk attacks and knocks him out. Rand reports the incident to the bridge. Yeah, this was significantly worse than I remembered it because I remembered that there's a struggle.
It's pretty brutal.
It's and unfortunately behind the scenes it's even worse. I almost didn't include this note, but I knew someone would bring it up and I feel like I have to address it because it's there and I know about it. So, according to Grace Lee Whitney, the actress who plays Janice Rand, while shooting the scene when the distraughtful, tearful Janice is recounting what happened to her to Spock, McCoy, and Goodkirk, William Shatner slapped her across the face to get her to register proper emotion. Since they shot uh, the attempted rape scene days earlier, Whitney apparently couldn't get into the same emotional space successfully, and it was Shatner's solution to the problem.
My note for that subsequent bit is, yeah, is that Kirk is, well, I say kind of, I'm more inclined to say just straight up gaslights her, being like,
Well,
I
not
didn't do this.
well, not really, because that Kirk didn't do it.
Sure, but like he's trying to be like, everyone's like, yeah, you, a version of you. I guess it all goes to my point of like, they see, it seems to take them a real long time to put two and two together and be like, there's two dogs, therefore two Kirks.
There's actually a reason for this. So my other note is you've already addressed it. It's taken everyone far too long to realize what's going on.
Right?
But the
Because like
prob
he's like, you didn't see me assault you, and she's like, no, but I did see you assault me. And instead of like standing up for herself and be like, no, you did this. And the scratch being an identifier, that's where I started laughing, because it was like, he, again, to bring it up again, he's wearing a different shirt. Like
right.
he's very noticeably different looking.
But I noticed this. My editor brain picked up on this immediately, and sure enough, I was like, this is wrong. This is a mistake. So apparently, in the original script, this scene and the scene where Scotty shows them the two dogs were
Yeah.
reversed. So this
Oh, okay,
scene,
that makes so much more sense.
yes. So this scene where Rand reports it happens prior to Scotty showing them the two dogs in the original script. For some reason, in the editing room, they decided to flip them.
Ah, that makes
Which
much more sense.
I'm going to read my note because it's actually, I think it tells why. The scene with Scotty revealing two animals should have been moved to after the scene with the senior officers and Rand. The fact is, as the episode is edited, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy don't immediately come to the conclusion that there was an evil Kirk duplicate after Rand's story and after Scotty showing them two alpha spaniels makes them look like morons. Originally, these scenes were switched in the script.
It does. It makes him look very dumb. Yeah.
It makes them look like, particularly Spock, but they all. So this kind of reminds me. I'm not. I don't really know why I started, and I haven't picked it up yet because I was a big Yu-Gi-Oh fan when I was a kid when it first came out, and I saw that it was on Netflix. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm gonna revisit this. Oh my god, these kids are fucking stupid. They're all dumb. They're all morons. Even the smart ones are fucking dumb because it's like they're they're figuring out how to play this game as they're playing this game. They should all be obliterated, but all the really good players are stupid. They're all
I mean,
morons.
to be fair, everyone cheats in that show. So
Well, I
like,
mean, yeah, it's true, but and then I realized it's like, oh, now I can't speak to the original Japanese dub because I haven't watched it. I assume everyone's at least a little bit smarter because that tends to
a
be
little
the
bit.
case. But the 4 Kids dub is really dumbing this down for children.
Yeah, there's 3 or 4 episodes of an uncut version, which is closer to the original Japanese, but still has the English voice actors. That is apparently quite good. But I like the 4 Kids dubs. I did a quite a large video about them. I love them because they're dumb and they're terrible.
Hey, what are you
It's
talking
why I love
about?
them.
There's a Japanese kid who sounds like he's from fucking Brooklyn.
The funniest bit is there's a show on that network which I talked about called Fighting Foodons, and there's a character on it called Spaghetti About It, and It's literally just Joey from that dub being like, "Forget about it." Oh, it's great! It's great! It's great! There's another character called Fried Ricer. It's exactly the kind of show you think it is.
This reminds me of Ultimate Muscle, and now I'm just having like if they made a
Oh
live
yeah,
action
yeah, it's the same people. Yeah,
they did a live action Yu-Gi-Oh, but like a Hollywood version. Just kidding. If they'd done this at the right time, could have gotten Mark Wahlberg to play Joey. Yugi, I don't even know how to play these cards. What the fuck are we doing? Do I play a
I mean,
monster? Do I play a trap? I don't know. I'm
my,
confused.
my favorite thing about Joey in particular is if you play his deck, in like actual Yu-Gi-Oh, his deck
You
is
will lose.
terrible. It's so
You will lose.
situationally good
Yeah, you will lose hardcore every time. Yugi's
every
deck is
time.
no better though.
No, but no, it's not. I mean, a lot of Joey's cards rely inherently on luck.
I mean,
That's kind of his
realistically,
problem.
the only good deck that I can recall is Kaiba's, just because
It's Kaiba.
it has three Blue Eyes White Dragons in it.
I mean, the Dark Magician is a terrible card because it requires 2 sacrifices and it only gives you 2,500 attack point. Blue Eyes requires the same amount of sacrifices and it gives you 3,000. It's just an inherently better card.
But not in the show. In the show, you
No,
can
but
just
in the
summon more.
show,
Yeah.
he has a bunch of. Well, it depends because eventually in the show they. When that show initially came out, they didn't have any rules. So if you're watching the first
Correct.
season, they didn't have any rules yet, and it wasn't until the Battle City where they established that's when they started using
Yeah.
the actual game rules.
Yeah.
So
So I have to share with you two stories real quick. Well, one story and then one reference. I don't know. Did you watch DBZ Abridged?
of course
Okay,
I did.
okay. So are you familiar with the Cell game shorts?
Yes, yes,
Did you watch the Yu-Gi-Oh one?
of course I did.
Oh my God. Actually, tournament illegal.
Right here in the rulebook you gave me, Monster Reborn has been tournament illegal since 2004.
Then I play Pot of Greed.
Also bad.
What?
2005.
Then Brain Control.
2010.
Slifer the Sky.
Oh, come on, all God cards are bad.
F you.
Yeah, I was really. I've been watching them talk about Dragon Ball GT. Quick aside, and Kaiser Neko drives me crazy because he intentionally mispronounces names. Like he know he pronounces Goku or
Oh
like.
no, he does that. Okay, so okay, this is a massive pet peeve of mine. Um, he's not mispronouncing them. He's pronouncing them in the Japanese way.
But he knows his audience understands it in the other way. It drives me crazy.
So here's the thing that happens that honestly really annoys me. It actually started annoying me during the Naruto English dub, which is pure trash. It's awful. The Naruto English dub is garbage. It's terrible acting. Everyone sounds the fucking same. My biggest problem with it, though, other than it just being horrendously bad and them hiring people who should not be voice actors, I'll say it because they can't act for shit, is the fact that you have very American sounding people, which is fine because it's an English dub for North America. But
Yeah.
when they say a Japanese name, they like adopt the correct Japanese pronunciation, but then go straight back to English enunciation. So
Really
you have
distracting.
except they don't do it all the time. They just so particularly for Naruto and Sakura. So you see what I did there? I'm
Yeah.
pronouncing it correctly, but with an English accent, like an
Yeah.
American English accent. I'm not. So like a lot of times in the dub, they'll be like, Sakura is probably the worst one because they're like, Sakura, what are you
Yeah.
doing? I'm just
With them with dragon like right now they're right at the end with the shadow dragons, right? So
Yeah.
instead of just calling him Omega Shenron, he's calling him 1 star, and I'm like, your audience watches the dub. Why are you doing this? It just makes you sound pretentious and obnoxious.
That's what it does. That's what it does, honestly. And see, the thing is, it probably annoys me because for a very short period of time I did that, but because I was trying to be accurate, but then I realized I sounded like a fucking douchebag, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
you can still pronounce it properly, but without like changing your accent. So like the average American who's not familiar with these names would say something like Sakura because that's how our inflection is.
Yeah.
But you can say Sakura,
Yeah.
and you're correct. You can say Naruto instead of Naruto, and you're correct, but you don't have to
Naruto.
say Naruto.
Yeah.
You
Well,
have
I
to say,
mean, I did
"Hey,
that fun like Ultraman. Ultraman. It's just fun to do.
Ultraman." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's just a pet peeve of mine. And now I kind of want to watch Star Trek in Japanese because I think that would be fucking hilarious.
見たまえこの無残な答えをこの責任は君一人に取ってもらうぞ
ミスターバリス、黙らないと強制手段に訴えますよ。
カーク、ついに分かったぞ。食料を与えなければいいんだ。
そうすれば自然に繁殖をやめる。
ありがたい話だ。
It would be very good.
Evil
Very good.
Kirk. Evil Kirk.
I mean, I'm in my I want everything to be an anime phase.
I mean, technically, it wasn't animated in Japan, but there is a Star Trek animated series.
I mean, yeah, I assume
That's
we're gonna watch
actually
it.
it's actually our next series. After we have 3 seasons of the original series, and then immediately after that, we got 2 seasons of the animated series.
Oh.
Oh no, I have to tell my story. So when I was a junior in sophomore or junior in high school, I can't remember. I think I was a sophomore, but anyway, my group of friends and I got really into playing Magic the Gathering like hardcore. And for for a period there, almost every weekend we would go to our buddy Aaron's house and we would literally just play Magic the Gathering all night. It was so much fun. But my friend, actually Nick from the Goosebumps crew, this story's about him, so I'm gonna throw you under the bus there, Nick. He's fine. This story's hilarious. I tell him it's one of my favorite stories to tell because he was so funny. So he's our friend Aaron was like a tournament ranked Magic player. He's very, very good. So even if we got close to beating him, we were very proud of this. But Nick was actually one turn away from being able to beat him, but he needed one card and he knew it was still in his deck, and he knew that if he pulled this one card, he would win, and there was
Are
nothing
the
Aaron could do.
cards?
So he did. He takes the card, big Yu-Gi-Oh stuff. After he says he's like, I need this one card, and if I get this card, I'll win. I'll beat Aaron. So he puts his hand on his deck, Yu-Gi-Oh style, pulls it up, holds it up in the air without looking at it, goes, "Are the cards?" Holds it out, looks at it, pauses for a minute, and goes, "Fuck you, are the cards?"
Oh, it's all for a happy ending.
Oh God!
That's funny.
We all lost our shit. That was so funny. He lost the next turn.
Yeah. Ultimately, yeah. I just have a bit about Spock. Spock said something to Kirk that's coming up that didn't make any sense to me. That I'm
Okay,
going to
well-
parse out with you.
Well, we'll hear what Spock questionably said to Kirk in a moment, but first, a quick word from one of our great sponsors. How's it going, everybody? It's Jake from the Down the Middle podcast, and I want to take a quick moment to invite you to check out our show, which airs every other Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on YouTube. If you love pro wrestling, you're definitely going to want to check this out. We talk about the latest in pro wrestling. AEW's pay-per-views are rough, man, and it's obvious, like, Tony Khan is booking for Tony Khan, and it's obvious because Tony Khan has clinical freaking ADHD, but the kind where like you can hyper focus on the thing you love. He's like, I legitimately want to watch wrestling for 7 hours. It's like, Tony,
Not everybody else does.
hardly
Go home.
anybody else does. We talk about some of our favorite things in pro wrestling. One of the best promos ever. Like, can we just say, like, I had fucking goosebumps. And here's the thing, I know to work, but I'm watching that and I'm like, I think MJF might have duped somebody. And we have a hot take here and there too. Nothing against Riho, it's just like, do you think the audience is stupid? Riho weighs 98 pounds. The vast majority of great moments in professional wrestling have nothing to do with the move. Don't get me wrong, the moves are part of it. Cena's like, I don't even remember how I won. Everybody remembers this. But the best part about our show is that you are part of the conversation. So check out the show and join in the fun. When we last left our intrepid crew, Evil Kirk had tried some pre-Me Too bullshit on Yeoman Rand. The good Kirk orders the crew to capture the evil Kirk, but at Spock's advice, he keeps the fact that their quarry is his evil half a secret, so as not to weaken the crew's faith in him. The crew
Yeah, okay, that was
instead-
just immediate flag on play. Okay, that's just
Yeah.
bad advice.
That's horrible
bad
advice.
advice. Right? Okay,
That's
okay.
awful.
I was like, what's his point? I don't understand the point he's making here. He's like, so if he doesn't say the very tactically advantageous thing of there's a second me running around, seems like kind of an important thing you should mention to your crew. Like, it seems like grossly irresponsible to not mention it to the crew.
There's no way. The only way Captain Kirk doesn't look bad is if he tells the truth, because they order the crew to capture Captain Kirk.
Right?
And then they find out afterward there was a body double. My first thing would be like, why didn't you just tell us there was a body double?
How is a transporter accident that isn't Kirk's fault of failing on Kirk's part to show weakness in the first place? What he said didn't make any sense to me. I had to go back. I was like, wait, what is he trying to say? like that him going through this is a personal failing of some sort. It just kind of seems like it's stoking good Kirk's already like ever brewing insecurities he's having throughout this episode.
But this is coming from Spock. It just doesn't.
Right?
It's so illogical.
I,
And
I
yes,
I
that
don't
was an
think it's a
insult.
performance thing. I think it's a writing thing. It feels like
Oh,
a
it's a
writing
it's
thing.
it's a writing thing. Yeah, the crew is instead told of an imposter recognizable by the scratches on his cheek. So you've already told them there's an imposter. This is? I actually noted that. Okay, if you really want to solve this issue, just good Kirk should have just put on a red shirt and confined himself to quarters while they searched for the evil Kirk, giving temporary command to Spock.
I mean, he's again. That's a note I have again is that he is wearing a different shirt, so it's not even like they're dressed the same. They're just like, hey, look for the me who's wearing the regular captain shirt guy. He's got a scratch on his face. It'll be immediately. Oh, he's kind of weird. It'll be immediately apparent, guys.
Well, but the thing is, the reason you put Kirk in a red shirt is because evil Kirk could not swallow his ego enough to put on a red uniform. He'd rather
That is true.
die. He'd rather die than get out of command gold.
That is true.
That's where my more sweaty Kirk note
Yeah,
is.
I noticed that. I something I was noticing progressively. He gets real sweaty at the end.
Well, he's to be fair, he's engaging in a lot of physical activity.
I mean, that is fair. That is fair.
He's running around. He's drinking. You know, he's
Yeah,
fighting people.
I
He's
suppose drinking will make you kind of hot. That would make you sweat quite a bit. Yeah,
he's rubbing up against other people, getting
he's
scratched.
he's knocking guys out.
Yeah, I mean he's moving around, so he's getting his
Also,
steps
yeah,
in.
I forgot to mention Yeoman Rand's her sort of reaction to being assaulted is once again very 1960s in that she just kind of is like, yeah, she's a little too forgiving for someone that someone would be today.
See, and the thing about that is
A lot
as
of
the
victim
episode
blaming that seems to happen.
as the episode is written, it's less so. It still is, don't get me wrong, but it's less so because by that point in the story, it's obvious that it was a different Captain Kirk. So it makes sense that she wouldn't be particularly like mad at good Kirk. But if this episode had been edited properly, there would have been zero context for that. As far as she's concerned, Kirk assaulted her, and Spock and McCoy are helping him cover it up.
Fair, yeah,
So
yeah,
yeah,
you make a good point. Yeah, fair.
so I agree wholeheartedly. She's way too okay with this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But to be fair, she gets victimized a lot on the show, and she always
True.
is way too forgiving.
True.
At least that's
Which again,
my
and
general consensus of her.
I'm gonna sound a little bit too liberal, but I don't have any. I don't presume to tell a victim of assault how they should react, but I agree with what you're saying. It feels a little too forgiving, and it feels a little too victim blaming for
The
for my
the
taste.
the assault is too dark for like if he had tried to like land a kiss and she gave him a that's where I'm like I would have liked it, especially towards the end when to jump ahead, you see that evil Kirk is capable of faking it. I would have
Yeah.
liked to see like a descent and that moment be the moment where like he goes slightly too far. I just think it was slightly too dark for
Yeah. Well,
this
and
kind of show.
I guess chalk one up for childhood innocence, but I remember it being more like portrayed as just him trying to land a kiss and then a struggle. Um, Clearly, I was much more naive the last time I
Yeah.
watched this episode because I mean, there's no way to misconstrue this. I mean,
No,
he,
good thing that guy walked in is what I'm saying.
yeah. Well, so I guess I remember it being him trying to kiss her, and then the struggle takes him to the ground, and that's not at all what happens in this episode.
No.
No, it's
No.
no. So, like I said, chalk one up to innocence, I guess. But I watched this, and my reaction, honestly, as I was watching, I'm like, this is this is pretty graphic. I mean,
Yeah, I was surprised.
especially for the 1960s. I mean,
I'm not a pearl clutcher by any sense of the imagination, but
no,
even
no,
I
me
went,
neither.
ooh,
Me neither.
ooh.
I mean, you got to think like even on television today, like
That's
that's
pretty
still
brutal.
like it's not the worst, but it's
For what it is
yeah,
what I always
yeah.
say.
That's
For
what
what it is.
That's what I'm saying. Because a lot of times that kind of stuff is implied. Like you have like your Law and Order
Yeah.
shows, you rarely actually see. At least I don't know. This might not be the case, but like you usually don't see it. It's usually implied, or you get like a
The most graphic Law and Order ever got, to my basic recollection, is there's an episode where you hear it happening in
yeah
another
stuff
room. And that
stuff.
episode was really gnarly. again, I'm excited to get. We're getting some peak. We're coming into some peak evil Kirk.
We are.
There's
It's
some-
good. It's good stuff. The evil Kirk hears this announcement and uses makeup to mask his injury, which once again, very good plot convenience that he just so happened to be in a quarters with makeup.
Oh, for sure.
That was his exact skin tone, mind you.
That's the moment where he yells, "I'm Captain Kirk" angrily.
I'm Captain Kirk!
So how often do you think William Shatner has just straight up yelled angrily into a mirror, "I'm Captain Kirk"? I'm Captain Kirk!
No, just like imagine that scene in V for Vendetta when the TV guy's in the shower and he's like talking to the mirror while he's doing it. It's just Shatner in his shower, just
I'm Captain Kirk!
I even to this day, there's no way. At least once a week, he's not like, "I'm Captain Kirk." No way. I
to be
refuse to
fair-
believe it.
To be fair, he was Captain Kirk.
He was Captain Kirk. He
Um,
was Captain Kirk.
But yeah, back to the pure dumb luck and we've established there's a multiculture of ethnicities on the Starship Enterprise, and he just so happens to go into a room 1 in 240 of makeup with the exact same skin tone as his.
But is there a chance that it's like Star Trek future makeup, which it just all makeup matches your skin tone
Which
inherently?
That's a much better answer, and honestly, that product would.
I feel like they have that.
They have it to a certain extent today, but to be able to be completely unnecessary to match a skin tone at all, like even light, medium, or dark, that will make $1 billion. So
I mean, yeah.
he secures a phaser, but he steals a phaser from a security. Oh no, wait, he does tell him to give it to him, doesn't he?
Yeah. Okay. Wilson doesn't listen very well.
Yeah, not particularly.
Like, did you not hear the announcement that said, "Just so you know, there's a second Kirk out there. Don't give him anything or help him in any significant way. Here's your phaser, evil Kirk."
Well, again,
And then he
That's-
karate chops him.
that's
Here's your hubris. For your hubris, you fool.
hubris chop.
Yeah.
This is the third or fourth time where something happens purely for plot convenience, but then Evil Kirk goes into hiding in the engineering section. My notes here: Evil Kirk, fuck them books, because he just clears that for no reason whatsoever, other than just pure anger, being like, "Fuck you, smart people."
Right?
And then this is where I look. I'd established Evil Kirk is indeed wearing eyeliner and petroleum jelly to make him look more evil. So
Just his look generally made me laugh.
So I mean, like I jokingly referred to this as emo Kirk in my mind.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make me change my mind.
But if his hair had been disheveled and come down like this, that would have.
I mean,
that would have been fantastic.
That would have been phenomenal.
Prompted by Spock, the good Kirk anticipates his evil counterpart, and they go to search in engineering. While the two Kirks face off, Spock disables the evil Kirk with a Vulcan nerve pinch.
My note says the two Kirk effect. It looks good for the 60s. I was impressed. There was some good body work in this.
See, I disagree, because I saw that and I'm like, there's no way. This looks nothing like William Shatner at all.
Interesting. I thought it was convincing, but okay, fair enough. I thought that they were maybe utilizing a bit of splits, like actual split screen.
They did in 2 shots, but the rest of it was body work.
Interesting. I thought when he was fighting, I thought it was reasonably believable.
The fighting was oddly enough, it was the scenes where they were like standing or walking towards each other, what was really obvious to me.
I thought the one shot where he's in the bed and he's standing next to him, that one looked good.
They looked better than it should have, considering the shot. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
the 60s, to be fair, all for the 60s.
Well, we my friends and I used that same camera trickery when we did our online wrestling show back in the mid 2000s, because we had we introduced a character that had a wig, and all we did was to show, because it was played by the same person, all we did was put the wig on somebody else and did a back shot, and then just dubbed over it. Like it was
I mean, this utilizes the very easy tool of evil Kirk, cut, good Kirk, evil Kirk, cut, good Kirk. So like it doesn't need a body double for a ton of it.
Except this show, and it's happened on 2 episodes because when they did Real McCoy and Fake McCoy, this happened too. When they would do a slow pan across, you would still see the cut.
I mean, yeah, it's not
So-
perfect. It's still television in the 1960s.
But yeah, so my note actually says, I get it was the 60s, but the body doubles are obviously not William Shatner.
I see. That's so funny. I thought it was, for the most part, believable. That's
Well,
very funny to me.
what do you think, YouTube, or Spotify or anywhere? What do you think, internet? Do you think that the body double was convincing, or do you agree with me and think that it was leaving a little
Terrible.
bit to be desired? I'm not going to say it was terrible. I'm probably cutting it up a little too much because, like you said, it was the 60s. But just I just laughed because I'm like, that's obviously not William Shatner.
I mean, no.
We see the Vulcan nerve pinch, and this is treated the way you see it on screen. It is very much treated like it's the first time you see it. It's not chronologically, but again, in the order that these episodes were produced, this is technically the debut of the Vulcan
It
nerve
looked
pinch.
very like
New.
very deliberate, and like this
Yeah.
is the first time I'm meant to be seeing, because it's the first. I didn't notice it the last time, but this time like he like snakes up and he Vulcan nerve pinches them, and I'm like, okay, that's definitely the Vulcan nerve pinch.
Well, and if you remember in the Naked Time, the previous episode, Spock does it to Sulu, and Kirk actually says to Spock, "You're gonna have to show me that sometime."
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I missed that the first time.
But yeah, so originally Spock was supposed to give him a hubris chop to subdue the evil Kirk, a karate chop. But Leonard Nimoy felt that a race of beings, which this is just laughable considering we've seen Spock hit a woman
Yeah, I
like
mean, yeah,
repeatedly. But Leonard Nimoy reasoned that a race of people that had adopted logic as their core philosophy would have adopted a way of subduing an attacker without like striking them.
that makes sense. Yeah.
Which it makes sense until in the first episode we ever see on television, Spock literally slaps a woman across the face 3 times.
Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah, I made a joke about that, didn't
Which,
I?
to be fair, he knew it wasn't a woman. But we also did see him man slap Kirk, which again he was under the influence. So I guess when a Vulcan is conscious, I also saw a note, and I have to take issue with this. I saw a note suggesting that that move was inspired from Krav Maga. As a practitioner of Krav Maga, that'd be some bullshit.
I
It's the
I don't think I've
opposite.
heard that.
No, see, it was a note that I saw on IMDb, and I'm like, that is just patently false. First of all, there's no nerve pinches in Krav Maga because, fun fact, they don't work.
Yeah.
But just because they were like, well, because Leonard Nimoy's Jewish and he would probably know Krav Maga. I'm like, that's incredibly racist. But,
Right?
I mean, if Leonard Nimoy was originally from Israel, maybe, but Krav Maga would still be relatively new at this point.
I always thought that the Vulcan nerve pinch didn't come from anywhere. Like it doesn't work. That's the whole thing with it.
Yeah, well, it would theoretically work with a Vulcan, but
Yeah.
but anyway. So yeah, I had to call out the note about it being inspired by Krav. No, Krav Maga would have been like grab the motherfucker and break his neck. That's Krav Maga.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of subduing. That's some Aikido shit. It's like, no,
Yeah.
we're going to use their energy against them. Krav Maga is like kick him in the dick repeatedly and
Yeah.
then stab
Take
him.
him out.
Spock and McCoy realize that both Kirks are mentally deteriorating, and they must find a way to reverse the transporter accident to save them, as well as the stranded landing party.
See, it's funny that you mentioned the ticking clock, because that is a ticking clock of the slow. But my question is, they never fully explain like they don't explain the mechanics of the split well enough for me to understand the deterioration of both of them. It just kind of feels like an arbitrary third like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like last minute ad, basically.
It feels that way. I feel like they explain it well enough because they're two parts of a whole, and the longer they're not together, the more they both deteriorate.
I tend to think, I guess because I think of things more literally, I'm like, so wait, is his brain being split in half? Like, what is the actual, like, what is actually happening to them on a physiological level, I guess, is maybe where.
Yeah, that's not explained too good.
No, not that I'm expecting it to, but that's just how my brain works. I'm like, I have questions about how this works.
So, but this is where I disagree.
When you're like, it's not magic, anyway.
Yeah. But this is where I have my note about disagreeing with referring to the Kirks as good and evil Kirk. Yin and Yang would be much more appropriate because and they kind of sort of go into it because Spock points out that Kirk's strength of command is mostly in the Dark Kirk.
Yeah, well, you know what it reminds me of? Did you ever watch the cartoon Jackie Chan Adventures? Are you familiar
Love
with it
it.
at all?
I love that show, and I know
It
exactly
reminds
what you're
me
talking
of
about.
the tiger talisman, where it's not evil. Jackie is not evil. He still has
Yeah,
sort of Jackie's moral code. He's just more willing to bend it.
well, he's Yang Jackie, and that's the thing.
Yeah,
So this is the difference. Which again, most people, I'm not trying to sound like I'm a philosophy professor, but this is how it was explained to me. A lot of people in the West have trouble understanding the Taoist principle of yin and yang because we think very much black and white, good and evil, generally speaking, as a society.
yeah,
And whereas in more Eastern philosophies, it's very much a harmonious relationship, which is why in the yin and yang, you have on the white side, you still have the dark circle, and on the
yeah.
black side, you still have the white circle because it's two parts of a whole. Without one, you wouldn't have the other. And
Mhm.
they're both necessary to create a whole person. And that's why Yin Kirk and Yang Kirk, which they never would have said on television in the
No.
60s, so I get it.
Way
But
too Asian.
oh my. But even the concept of them needing to be reunified with each other is very much, I mean, that's yin and yang. That's
Yeah,
the whole thing. And then they acknowledge the fact that, you know, Kirk's strength of command is mostly in the yang part, but it's tempered and becomes effective by the yin part, which has the restraint, the compassion, the logic, the calculation, all that stuff.
yeah.
But the strength of will, the willingness to fight and be violent when necessary, it's all a marriage that makes one very effective commander.
I think it maybe would have been a tad more. Not that I again love this episode, but I think it would have been a tad more interesting if again, Evil Kirk hadn't been strapped to a bed for the back half of the episode. Like if he had to learn to like work with good, and they had to learn to work together. That I think would have been, but that would have required the use of the effect of having two Kirks around at the same time, which I understand is difficult logistically.
If you were to redo this episode concept today in like say Strange New Worlds or our proposed Star Trek series, which you would have seen on the Toon Talk 2.0 episode of when we talked about Star Trek, where we have a descendant of this Sulu as a captain, that would be very interesting to
Yeah,
have that be the case instead of, and you could do that now with
yeah,
the
oh, absolutely.
visual effects that we can do now. I gotta say that'd be a really good episode.
Yeah, yeah. I because that's my one thing with this episode overall. It's just yeah. I wanted more nuance, but I'm also like it's episode 6 of a show, so I'm like, am I asking too much? Is also what also is going to be my question. I think by the end of this.
We'll get back to the show in just a minute, but first, another word from one of our great sponsors.
Forsan Records is proud to introduce the newest album from Velena, including the singles Cut Me to the Quick, and Remedy. Velena, Save Me From Myself, available now wherever you get your music.
Spock and Scott use power from the ship's impulse drive to reverse the transporter on the dog-like specimen. Oh, the Alpha Spaniel. When it materializes, the creature is whole but dead.
Oh shit! The dog. Oh shit! The dog died. Wasn't expecting that.
So Jesus, they killed the dog. Didn't kill the dog.
Yeah, I was not was not expecting them to kill the dog.
Yeah, no, they
Also,
didn't
I've got
actually kill the
science in regards to fixing the transport. I've just got science fiction mumbo jumbo. You know, it's like they got to reverse the polarity. They always have to reverse the polarity.
dog. Well, believe it or not, that actually does make sense.
Oh, does it? I just think it's funny when they're like, we have to reverse course, the cross fix with the and you know what I mean, like that
Well,
weird
so
kind of like.
this is before Star Trek gets really sort of cliche with its there's actually a word for it, and I'm just blanking on it. Um, technobabble. That's what it is.
Technobabble.
It's really bad in like Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and really in Next Generation too. My favorite one is like divert all power to the shields, or like use auxiliary power, or transfer all power to blah 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 blah, as if you can
Yeah.
just like tell circuits to move power, which I guess in Star Trek you can.
I
But
suppose it's Star Trek. My suspension of disbelief is a little bit bigger in this instance.
yeah, so well, actually, you know what? I take that back. Reversing the polarity might make sense when you're talking about an antimatter matter engine, but in transporter, I don't think so. So yeah, we're gonna call that technobabble.
If
If you're an engineer,
you're an engineer.
illuminate us in the comments, please. Spock suggests that the animal died because its animal brain cannot handle the stress of its two halves being reintegrated. So Kirk will be able to survive the same procedure because he has his mind. While Dr. McCoy insists they can't take the risk that the death may have been caused by the ongoing transporter malfunction. This episode has one of those first moments where you really see that relationship I talked about in the earlier episodes of
Yeah.
Spock and McCoy very much being Kirk's the equivalent to his angel and devil, but not so much for morality. Um,
Yeah.
and I can see what you would want both of these people in your inner circle.
Oh, for sure. For sure. I'm still like, I love the dynamic. I mean, and I love the addition of Scotty in there because he's adding a totally different kind of thinking in there as well, which I really quite dig.
Well, Scotty, yeah, Scotty is another valuable asset, but Scotty is more of the reality check I found,
Yeah.
because that's he's very fond of saying, "I cannot do it, Captain. I cannot bend the laws of physics.
I'm doing my best, Captain. I'm doing my
I'm
best.
giving her all she's got."
He has not said that yet. I'm
No,
waiting patiently for that.
not yet, not yet. It's coming. It's coming. It will be a thing. So, fun fact about James Doohan, though, this is one of the few times in Star Trek where you can see that the middle finger on Jimmy Doohan's right hand is missing. Doohan lost the finger during the D-Day invasion in 1944.
Oh, no kidding.
He took great pains to conceal its absence during the series, but his full right hand can be glimpsed briefly when he reaches into the box holding the snarling alien dog. Which again, this just talks about how, time passes. It didn't even occur to me that some of these people would have served in the Second World War,
Yeah,
because
right. You don't think about that.
we're only 21 years removed from the end of the war.
Yeah, yeah, I noticed that a lot I noticed that a lot when watching movies from that era as well. Where you're like, yeah, they're not that far removed from it, are they?
No, and in fact, I actually want to now look up. Oh, wow. Okay,
Uh,
so geez, a lot of people. A large number of the original series writers, actors, and producers, and other production staff members served as veterans of the Second World War. Among these were Gene Roddenberry, James
oh,
Doohan, DeForest Kelley, Mark Leonard, Matt Jeffries, Robert H. Justman, Joseph Pevney, and Ralph Sineski.
oh,
Where did
interesting.
Okay, this is very interesting. I'm wondering. Well, because we know that James Doohan was at D-Day, so I wonder where did DeForest Kelley serve? Oh, I see this note here that DeForest Kelley is known for his role in westerns.
Oh,
I
that makes
really want to
sense.
see this now.
He definitely has that sort of look.
Yeah, I really want to see him. Which fun fact, Kelly was also born in Atlanta, Georgia.
Oh, interesting.
1934, blah, 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 blah. Made his film debut in the chorus of New Moon, 1940. And, oh no, he was almost, during World War II, Kelly served as an enlisted man in the United States Army Air Forces. He's assigned, okay, he was part of the first motion picture unit with the rank of private first class.
So
Okay,
he's an
so,
actor in the army.
yeah,
Oh,
doing,
okay.
oh, but this is fun. Kelly was spotted by a Paramount Picture scout while doing a United States Navy training film.
Oh, interesting.
So in a weird way, had it not been for World War II, we
Maybe not Scotty.
well, no, Dr. McCoy, at least as we know him today. So, this is why I love one of my favorite characters in Deep Space Nine is Dr. Bashir, but because he's the polar opposite of Bones. You get to see the change though, because he starts as this wide-eyed, really, naive young doctor, and by the series end, he's been through a war. He's been through an active combat zone. He's been on the frontier. he's seen various assaults on space stations and ships, and when you see that change, it's such a great arc to
Hmm.
watch. He becomes a hardened veteran, but still doesn't really lose his, I don't know how you would call it, his
Spirit.
yeah, he doesn't really lose his spirit, but it does become a little bit more mature. He becomes a lot more mature. With the landing party nearly dead from hypothermia, the good Kirk opts to gamble on the procedure rather than wait for an autopsy on the creature. Phasers apparently have a shotgun setting. Set my phaser from kill to heat gun.
I also I don't know if we skipped over, but when they came back from one of the breaks, Spock was doing the captain's log,
Yes, he
and
was.
I appreciated how his captain's log was far more concise and to the point than Kirk's is. Like Kirk, he tends to go into a lot of flowery detail describing, like his goes seemed to go on forever, whereas Spock was just like, "This is what happened. This is the point. Done."
Yeah, he's like
I was like,
literally.
I like there was a difference in character that I appreciated the attention to kind of that detail of like, yeah, his captain's log would be more concise. It just makes sense.
Yeah, it's kind of like asking a married couple to journal.
Yeah, yeah,
It's like
I can see that. Yeah,
it's like the wife is talking about like the minute details and how she feels, and then the husband's like ate a sandwich at noon. It was cold.
right. Kirk, it's two people now. It's been a
Yeah.
weird day. Spock out.
But yeah, and I did like the little note they add because my first question was like, well, you can send down like heaters and clothes and stuff, but Spock actually makes a point, or not just Spock. Kirk makes a point to us like, can't we send down heaters? And Spock is like, we tried, we sent them down,
Yeah,
they duplicated, and they don't work.
yeah. It makes them worse.
Although
I
you would
appreciate
think,
that it's like everything is getting duplicated. I like that detail as well.
well, but so send down some jackets or blankets, and then they just duplicate, and then you have more blankets.
So what? Yeah, but is it like okay, you're sending down like a down blanket or jacket, and now you're getting a jacket that doesn't have down? Now you're getting two jackets, but they don't have down anymore.
Probably. When good Kirk releases the evil Kirk, his other self overpowers him and gives him facial scratches to match his own. Pretending to be the good Kirk, he tells Rand the truth about the imposter and offers the chance to elaborate before heading to the bridge. He orders the crew to leave orbit, telling the navigator that the landing party cannot be saved, which should have been an instant red flag to everyone
I,
immediately.
but I like the scene with Yeoman Rand because I made me I brought this up a few times, but it made me wish that the entire episode was that where it was a bit again a bit more ambiguous which Kirk was which.
Yeah,
Like
they could have had a lot of fun with that.
yeah, and like it was like, oh, okay, he is capable of being suave, smart, like sexy, handsome Kirk, and not just like weird, enraged, drunk, rapey Kirk. Like he's capable of. So I think it would have been more interesting if maybe we'd seen the switch up, and then yeah, then you could have questioned the difference between like the placid Kirk,
Yeah, definitely.
solid Kirk on Kirk action. I have that note as well.
Very solid Kirk on Kirk action.
Believable double work is what I said. And
On the
also,
bridge,
you mentioned
yes.
it already. Evil Kirk is so sweaty.
He's very sweaty. The good Kirk and McCoy race to the bridge where the two Kirks face off. The good Kirk at last persuades evil Kirk that they need each other to survive and will both live on as parts of the same whole. More Kirk screams.
I thought that those sequences were he's considering he's acting and he's playing against himself, and he clearly does not remember moment to moment which one he is. It's impressive. Like he's doing some decent. Like it's a little silly, it's a little over the top, but it was working for me. I'm
It's
like, you know
supposed to
what?
be though. It's supposed to
Yeah,
be. Um,
I
did
could see why people make fun of it, but it was working for me.
did you notice the scratches switch sides?
No, I just noticed McCoy giving that look of like, man, it's been a weird Wednesday.
Yeah, which we're still early in this mission, but yeah, eventually you would just view that as like a Tuesday. Like,
He's just like, what is this? Is oh man, there's two of them now. I just
but if
like
you
it gave me real Harrison Ford vibes of like, I'm just tired.
but for both of them, their scratches are on their left cheek.
I
Except
didn't even notice that.
so
No.
there's a shot where the scratches move to the right side, and the reason being is because they realized when they were editing it that oh my God, I know this term and I'm just blanking on it. The line that you can't cross when you're shooting a scene because otherwise it'll look weird from a
Oh,
continuity
I know what you're
perspective.
talking about. I made a movie. I don't remember what it's called.
I can't. I'm spacing on what it's called.
Yeah.
But
Uh,
anyway, they broke that when they were shooting accidentally, and the only way to fix it was to flip the shot in post, and they just hoped people wouldn't notice. I noticed
Oh,
instantly.
I certainly didn't notice. No.
I noticed immediately, and I was like, every time I see something like that, it just reminds me of Robin Hood Men in Tights when the mole keeps moving
Oh,
on
I've
Prince
never seen
John's
that movie.
face.
That's funny.
You've never seen Robin Hood Men in Tights?
No, I've never seen it.
Oh, you must. You'll love it.
At least I don't think I know the song.
We're men in tights. We roam around the forest looking for fights.
I don't think I've seen all of it. I think I've seen parts of it.
Oh, you'll love it. You must watch it. But the same thing happened. Okay, you've seen Young Frankenstein though, right?
Yes, that I have seen.
So
Yes.
Igor's hump keeps moving. It's a joke in the movie.
Oh, that's so fun. I thought that movie was so weird.
It's
The thing
it's
I was so
delightfully.
distracted by was just how the movie ends on a weird erection joke.
It's a wonderful erection joke. I'm putting on the Ritz. Oh my God. Captain Kirk orders Scott to attempt the reversal process in the transporter, and Kirk is rejoined as one being. With a sense of command and goodwill restored, and the transporter repaired, Kirk orders the landing party beamed up immediately. They are safe, despite the cold. Rand tells Kirk about her last encounter with the evil Kirk, but he cuts her off before she can discuss the issue any further. This is probably the worst part of the episode. I mean, this is if the assault was questionable.
Oh, what Spock says to
Ooh,
her at the end?
oh,
I was like, oh, that was icky. My note is literally, what is Spock implying? Kind of icky. I was like, that's kind of icky. Ooh, is
that's
it implying that she liked it? Don't like that.
so once again we get smarmy Spock, and I saw a grin. I saw a grin from that
Yeah.
smarmy, pointy-eared fuck.
I didn't like it.
That
I
was
didn't like it. I
very
don't like it. Yeah.
that was very uncharacteristic Spock. Like
Yeah. I was like,
I
ooh,
get,
this is
yeah, I get. So actually,
that's that 1960s peeking out.
so Grace Lee Whitney was very unhappy. So the actress that plays
Good
Yeoman
for
Rand,
her.
she was very unhappy about the last scene of the episode in which Spock asked Yeoman Rand, the imposter had some very interesting qualities, wouldn't you say, Yeoman? In her autobiography, she wrote, quote, I can't imagine any more cruel and insensitive comment a man or a Vulcan could have made to a woman who had just been through a sexual assault. But then
Yeah, no
some
kidding.
but then some men really do think that women want to be raped. So the writer of the script, ostensibly Richard Matheson, although the line could have been added by Gene Roddenberry or an assistant scribe, gave us a leering Mr. Spock who suggests that Yeoman Rand enjoyed the assault and found evil Kirk attractive,
Yeah, see,
despite this.
I thought that was just a lot of times when I because people accuse me of reading too much into stuff, and I'm like, he's
No, that
suggesting that you just no likey.
Yeah. So despite this, though, Whitney enjoyed the episode. Quote, I love The Enemy Within because it gave me a chance to really react and act with William Shatner. I loved it. I loved the whole concept of him breaking into two characters because that really was what Kirk and Rand were about. There were two sides of Kirk and two sides of Rand. Rand was there to be of service to him, but she also was in love with them. But she knew she mustn't go over she knew she mustn't go over the boundaries, which that is one part of their relationship that I do like. You do feel that tension of like, yeah,
Yeah,
these two do totally want to bone each other consensually, but
yeah.
they both know they can't because, you know,
I think yeah, maybe if he had crossed like to cross a professional line, if they had a the purely professional relationship, it's just the tone of that scene is so off. It's so off for me. It
and
just doesn't.
yeah,
I understand what it just feels like she's trying to reconcile what wasn't a very trying to be like. When did she write that autobiography? Like 20 years later, being like
maybe
trying to
even longer.
reconcile a not so great thing.
Well, no, I can imagine her being quite upset at the time, but in the 60s, what are you going to do? You know, and
Yeah, exactly.
especially with a character like Yeoman Rand, because honestly, in that show, if you're not Kirk, Spock, or McCoy, I mean, you could easily be written out of that show.
True. I just don't feel like compared to say the only other strong female character on the show, which is Uhura. Uhura never gets victimized, not to the same degree that Yeoman Rand does. She really does take the brunt of like
Yeah,
you
she
notice he didn't go
really,
for your Uhura, is what I'm saying.
well, Uhura wasn't in this episode, but, um, and there, well, as we've seen, there really is more sexual chemistry between Uhura and Spock, and then Uhura and
True.
Kirk. Although
True.
they do share a forced kiss in the in a later episode, Uhura and Captain Kirk.
So for me, up front, it's all my favorite science fiction like I love the idea of an evil version of yourself. So going forward, I didn't know that there was more than one on this show
Yes,
because going
there's
forward, we obviously have Mirror Kirk. Is it a different kind of evil in that case? Because that's where I'm curious. Like, what's to differentiate this evil Kirk versus that evil Kirk?
that one's pretty similar actually. But there are a couple of other instances of Kirk doubles and other. I think there's 4 in total in the
Oh,
series.
really?
Yeah,
Interesting. I
so
didn't know that.
and they're all fun. They're all delightful. Once again, though, 0 red shirts killed.
I had my note ready for it. There was none. I'm surprised we're 6 episodes and we haven't seen a one.
Not a single one.
Red shirts haven't really been that prevalent generally. I mean, the most is Scotty. He's wearing a red shirt. He's the most red shirt we've seen.
He's an
Really?
officer though, so he's safe.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
just outside
so
the show, he's a main cast member.
yeah,
He's
so
pretty safe.
our red shirt total is still at 0. I'm
You better
starting to
believe the
think I'm
first
starting
time
to
it
think
happens, I'm going to
this.
bring it up.
Oh yeah, we are. We're gonna bring it up. No one's
Well, in
been
the last few
killed
episodes, it's been like gold and blue shirts that are taking the
yet. Yeah,
brunt of the casualties.
they're really maybe like the red shirts have a union or something, and then it just gets dismantled, and
Perhaps.
like a workers' rights groups that's just like, you know what, we're good, and then they dismantle, and then all of a sudden working conditions become awful. I just
My theory is there was like 5 red shirts, and they were just like, well, they're the easiest to get dirty and clean.
you know what, that might actually that probably is the case now that you mention it.
Oh, you're gonna really notice some dirt on some yellow shirts.
And the blue
Ugh.
ones though, and the
Yeah,
blue
and the
ones
blue
too.
ones. You want to
Not so
scuffle
much
up a
on the
blue
red.
shirt?
That was the enemy within. Do you have any final thoughts?
I like this one. Thus far, the last one's still my favorite. I did enjoy this. I just it didn't. For me, the worst thing is when a story doesn't utilize its premise well enough, and I just was like, I want a more subtlety from this. And that has everything to do with its era, and I feel guilty holding that against it. Like I just don't think that they were capable of that kind of subtlety back in the '60s. But I just wanted. I was like, I just wish there was a bit more because especially at the end where you have Evil Kirk making the plea to not wanting to go back, and I'm like, I just didn't get enough with Evil Kirk to really feel for this dilemma. I didn't understand him as much as a character as I would have liked.
Yeah,
But otherwise,
that's
I had a
fair.
good time. There was a lot of goofy Shatner acting. Like
Oh,
goofy Shatner acting will carry an episode for me at this point.
it absolutely will. And then, like you said, we got some Sulu, we got some McCoy. We
Yeah,
get
Sulu had some good one-liners. He was giving some sass. I was enjoying that.
something like sassy. Just give me some sassy Sulu. Like just like you said, one of my favorite episodes, but probably not my favorite. I think my favorite thus far has been the Naked Time.
I
Um,
appreciate how every time we go to like and the next time you haven't like given away a single one. I would not have expected evil Kirk to happen in this. If you were to be like, what do you think the next episode's gonna be about? I would not have said evil Kirk.
well, so actually, fun fact
Nothing
before I announce
metaphysical,
what
certainly.
what what do you think the next episode will be about?
Based on the title. What's the
Mhm.
title again?
The next episode we'll be looking at is titled Mud's Women.
Oh, I mean, automatically, it's just like Amazon women. Like the episode of Futurama where they go to the like snoo. That's what it makes me think
That's
of.
actually my favorite episode of Futurama.
That's how I say I want to go.
So, fun fact though, that episode is actually inspired by an episode of the original series of Star Trek.
That's what I figured. Dude, there's a lot of episodes of that show where I'm like, this surely is based. But that's what I think. It's gonna be like they discover like Amazonian women or something.
No.
Dang it!
You're gonna have fun with the next episode though.
I've
It's
yet to
one
have a
of
bad time.
it's one of the most 1960s episodes in the whole show.
Really, I mean, to me, this is this has been the
Oh,
most 1960s episode thus far, just
oh,
because there's like some dubious consent happening in this episode.
oh, buckle up, my friend, buckle up. Well, join us next week when we take a look at said episode, Mud's Women.
What is a registration beam?
I have no idea.
Harcourt, Fenton, Harry, Mudd is a fun character. Well, but she's like she went from what she's just got makeup on now. So did the makeup is the makeup
Exactly.
in her head? Like what? It didn't make any sense.